Hi, everybody. My name is Carrie Spitzy, and I'm a graduate career advisor with the Office of Career and Professional Development at Virginia Tech. And I'd like to thank you for taking a few minutes to tune in with me to talk about some interviewing skills. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a few different things about the interview process. We're going to look at the detail, the questions, how to prepare, as well as how to prepare for various types. We're going to talk about the interview itself and then the follow-up. But first, I always like to have everybody just take a minute. If you have an interview that's coming up, let's get clear on why you were asked to interview before we take the next step forward. It's kind of an important anchor. You have this interview opportunity because the employer has seen something in you. They are excited to talk to you. They have looked at your application material and are really curious to learn more about who you are and what you can bring to the organization. So you have the baseline of what they're looking for, and they're eager to know more. So just a great thing to kind of always anchor back to. So let's go over some details. So you've been invited to interview, congratulations. Before you can delve into any kind of preparation, I think it's important to kind of think about grabbing a few key pieces of information. And so hopefully these details will be shared without you having to ask. But if they don't share these kinds of details that we're going to be talking about, make sure that you ask. So it's always good to understand what kind of format are they going to be using. Is this a phone? Is this a Zoom? Is this in person? And also understanding the type. A lot of times first interviews will be something along the lines of screening, sort of a screening interview, or it could be the first round. So every industry, every company does it a little bit differently. So it's a good thing to know what to kind of expect. In terms of who is going to be interviewing you, I think this is important to know as well, so you can do a little bit of research beforehand, looking at profiles in LinkedIn and just getting familiar with their role, what it is that they do, and it also helps you to prepare some questions that you may want to ask of them. So getting the names, getting the titles will help not only this research piece, but I think it also helps us tend to feel a little bit more settled, that we know the name and the title of the person that we're going to be talking to. And then lastly, knowing what the time options are. Sometimes candidates are given choices. Would you prefer this particular block of time, or are you maybe thinking about this other B or C block of time? So if it's a choice, think about how much time you need to prep and feel prepared. And if that's not that first interview slot, not a problem. They're giving you a range. So please feel free to really think about what's going to work best for you. So let's look at the types of interview questions. The industry that you're entering will help you know which types of questions you'll be encountering. But no matter what, behavioral questions are always going to show up. So whether you're doing technical, case, what have you, behavioral questions are going to show up. So the first type of interview question is sometimes called verification or pre-screening. This is just making sure you have the skills that they're looking for, you have the educational background, you have some level of experience that matches to the position description. A lot of times they want to know just a very broad they want to get a broad understanding of your interest in the role, including salary expectations. And we're going to talk in just a little bit about how to field that particular question. There's also such a thing called opinion questions, where they ask you something to really get a sense of how you feel about it, what your preference is. So an example might be, what do you see as your biggest professional success to date? Or what's your preferred management style? So again, it's not there. None of these are trick questions. I should have mentioned that at the beginning. None of these are designed to be trick questions. They really are designed to get to know you as a professional in a short period of time. Behavioral questions. Most of you have heard this term before. It's really about delving into how you conduct yourself, how you act in a certain situation, and they're looking for qualities that support those actions. So an example would be, explain a time when you needed to persuade someone you didn't get along with to complete a work task. Now, a competency type of interview question is similar to a behavioral, but it's asking how you used specific skills related to the position. So in other words, an example might be, what actions did you take when your network was infected with a virus? So they aren't necessarily looking for attitudes or behaviors or those qualities, but they're looking how you use specific skills that you probably would have to use in the position for which you're interviewing. Don't get too caught up between the differences here, behavioral versus competency. I've seen them used interchangeably, as a matter of fact. But I would very much encourage you to look up on Google, on our website, the careers.vt.edu, to really get a sense of some sample behavioral questions, just to start getting familiar with what those look like. So before we move ahead to the other types of interview questions, I really wanted to just stop for a second and focus on the question that you might get at the very beginning around salary expectations. So first and foremost, what I want you to take out of this slide is trying to avoid giving one number, because as soon as you give one number, you're pretty much locked into that number. So if for any reason you have priced yourself below market value, there's not going to be a great opportunity to argue for more money or argue for a different incoming salary, because you've already told them what you're expecting. So there's a couple of different ways you can answer this. The first way is to deflect it. So I've given you some sample language here. For an answer, I'd love to take a few more questions. I'd like to ask a few more questions to really get a better idea of what the position entails, and that way I can provide a more realistic expectation. The second way to do this, and the second way is a fairly common route to take, you provide a range based on any salary research that you've done up to that point. And before an interview, even if it's a verification or pre-screening interview, you want to have done some type of salary research for that position in the geographic area for which it's located. So you have a salary range that you can provide if asked, and that's the route that you want to take. Make sure that the bottom number of your range is acceptable for you. And I think that's where a common pitfall happens with us as we negotiate. We go below the number we actually feel comfortable with because we want to appear accommodating. But the only person that's going to be looking out for you in this negotiation process is going to be you. So based on the market values that you're finding in your research, look to make sure that your bottom number is still acceptable for you. And then the range should stay within a $5,000 to $10,000 range that you provide. There's also the option to include some negotiation options. So something like this: I'm seeking a position that pays between $75,000 and $80,000 annually, but I am open to negotiating salary depending on benefits, bonuses, equity, stock options, etc. So what this showcases is that you understand that an offer is much more than just a salary, much more than just a number, that there are other things that can be negotiated. So quick recap: it's not uncommon at the very first part of this process to get asked something around salary expectations. Try not to get thrown by it. Try to anticipate it. Make sure that you have chosen a method of how you'd like to answer that question based on the research that you have done. And it doesn't have to be hours and hours of research. Looking at Glassdoor, salary.com, payscale.com, and really getting a sense of what's the average market value for this type of position in the geographic area that I'm looking at. So let's move back to questions. We have some more questions here. Situational can be how you handled or how you're currently handling any real life workplace situation. So something, a question might be, what would you do if you made a mistake that no one else noticed? A case study is very typical for those in the consulting industry. It's solving a business problem. So a sample case scenario would be something like this. Your friend needs your help. They're thinking of opening a coffee shop in a new city and wants your business advice before they proceed. Should they do it? So they're going to throw a particular situation at you, and what they're looking for you to do is walk through your thought process, your recommendations, and provide a basis to back up those recommendations. Brain teasers. Actually, before I go there, let me just mention Bain and Company as well as McKinsey have really good preparation resources on their website. So I'd highly recommend reviewing those for more information and tips. And I believe both of these companies give sample case scenarios with guidance on how to answer. So when we get to brain teasers, there's about 7 common types. And I'm not going to go into them in depth, but it's the how many things are there? How many things could fit in ABC? Maybe it's do some quick math, or the why is a common item the way that it is? Or the explain a certain concept to a difficult to explain concept person. The solve this mystery, or the how you would do something ridiculous. I'm going to dive down a little bit deeper into technical. I'm not going to spend too much time here, but want to close with random questions. And random questions really are exactly that. They might just be really super random, not apropos of anything. Some questions that you literally can't prepare for. Sometimes they use them to see how quickly you think on your feet. And to just rewind very quickly, brain teasers, you most often see these types of questions in very technical fields. And speaking of technical, let's talk about technical interviews. So a lot of times there's a pre-interview online assessment. Some employers use an online test of just basic knowledge or a coding exercise to narrow down a field of candidates. And this might happen before or after an initial phone screen. But generally, it's a time test that has to be completed by a certain date. Phone, this may be a basic screen with general background information that they ask you. Additionally, for coding positions, you might be asked to type answers into a shared Google Doc that they have open, or collaborate on a shared editor like CoderPad. Some companies may have multiple rounds of phone interviews, but just make sure to clarify the format of the interview ahead of time. They might use Zoom. There's also the on-site. So the technical component may involve answering questions that are related to knowledge about a particular topic or process or product. You might be asked to outline the solution to a problem on a whiteboard or to make a presentation to a team. So for coding interviews, really be prepared to write code on a whiteboard or on a company-provided computer, or even engage in a pair programmer assessment. It just pays to get comfortable with writing down your thought process and your working through the solution, because you will most likely be doing this in your interview. There might also be multiple rounds of on-site interviews with different teams. So just, make sure to clarify the format and ask who you're going to be interviewing with ahead of time. Just some extra preparation for those technical interviews. You really do want to review those basic processes, as well as any skills that are going to be related to the position to which you're applying. I've heard from students in the past who've said that they were asked to work with skills that they hadn't touched for a long time. So going way back to basics can be really useful here. I'd really suggest reviewing and taking advantage of any interview prep materials. So let's look a little bit at how to prepare for an interview. The first question that I want to hit on here is the tell me about yourself. This 9 times out of 10, if not 10 out of 10, you will get this question or a derivative of this question. And I think it helps to kind of drill down how you want to plan to answer it. Because it can feel a little disorienting. Oh my gosh, what are they looking to know about me here? There is a formula that we're going to go over in a second regarding ways to organize and answer behavioral and competency interview questions, which is called the STAR method. But I do want to spend a little bit of extra time on this one. So first and foremost, skip stating your name unless they've somehow mispronounced it. And the reason I say this is because they already know your name, or they should know your name, right? So they've asked you to interview, they have your application materials, and by you beginning with, hi, I'm Carrie, what that communicates is a distrust in them knowing who you are. And it also comes across as being very memorized and rehearsed. And if you've ever heard me talk about networking and things like that in the past, it really does tend to turn people off if they feel as though they're not getting genuine interaction. So that being said, let's look at a way to kind of break the answer down. Let's look at a formula, present, so addressing the present, the past, and the future. And all of this happens in about a minute, maybe a minute and 30 seconds. So it doesn't take long to answer this question. So looking at present, you might want to address what your current role and scope is, even if you certainly can indicate that you're a student. And I just saw that there is a little bit of a typo on the slide, so I apologize. It should say recent, not recent. So any kind of recent accomplishment that you want to quickly highlight. The past, how you got to your current role. If you're a student and you're not working, maybe how you got to this particular field of study, and any previous experience that relates to the position that you're applying to. And bear in mind, because you have like a minute to a minute and 30, they're not thinking that you're going to provide them with deep answers to anything. What you are doing is you're providing a very 30,000-foot view of yourself as a candidate, both now, how you got to where you are, and where you want to go in the future. And that's what that future is, what you're looking to do next, why you're interested in the role, and how you'd be a great fit. I want to caution you here on this last piece. Try to make sure that you address how you would benefit them by being in the position rather than them benefit you. We know that you're interviewing because this could be a very good opportunity for you. That's totally fine, and that's a valid point. The interview is about you talking about how you meet their needs. For some sample answers, there's a great article. And again, I just noticed another typo in the slide, so I apologize. But from the Muse, how to answer, tell me about yourself in an interview, plus examples. If you're anything like me, I love a good example. So check that article out to really get a sense of how to bring those three components together in a very succinct way. Another derivative of the tell me about yourself question is walk me through your resume. So what the interviewer doesn't want from you here at this point is to review each section of the resume with them line by line. So don't fall into that trap. It's really more of an overview of your preparation, any relevant experiences, skills, and accomplishments as they relate to the role. So the interviewer will ask to know more about something if they want to know more about something. So some things to kind of keep in mind. Think breadth, not depth. Stay concise. 1 minute, 2 minute max. 2 minutes is probably a little bit too much. I would say same thing as tell me about yourself, 1 minute to a minute and a half. Highlight what's relevant to the position, including enthusiasm. 3, avoid reading the bullet points. What you want to do here is find the threads. And what I mean by that is that there's going to most likely be a common thread that runs underneath your experiences in education. It might be an altruistic thread. It might be a technical thread. It might be a people-centered or empathic thread. You can use that thread to connect your experiences together and highlight anything that speaks directly to the position. You want to, again, think about time framework present, past, and future. You can still address all three of those components in answering the question, walk me through your resume. Connect the past, the present, the future to the position. If there are any gaps, it's okay to acknowledge them. You don't have to go into major explanation there, but it's absolutely okay to acknowledge if there's a gap on the resume. And then 7, practice, practice, practice. Again, for sample answer, another article from the Muse, How to Respond to Walk Me Through Your Resume and Get Your Interview Started on the Right Note. Highly recommend. So I promised you that we would talk about an answer structure. The first is the STAR method. Some of you may be already familiar with this. It's thinking through, and you don't, let me be very clear, what you don't do is answer the question like, okay, well, here was the situation. These are the tasks that I took on. These were my actions. This was a result. This framework is really more for you to cue it up in your mind and to structure your answer. So you don't want to necessarily walk them through, here was my S, here's my T, here's my A. But you want to, again, just sort of formulate your answer based on this particular framework. So you want to set the context. What was going on? What was the situation? What were you responsible for? You know, what were you tasked to do? What were the expectations? And then what steps did you take to solve a problem, to fix something, to address a gap? What was the process? Were there any obstacles? Were there any challenges? And then lastly, what was the outcome? Always, always, always land positively with the outcome. Even if it was a bad outcome, if you learned something significant, if you learned how not to do something, so the next time you tried it, you were able to get a successful result, that's what you want to land on. So you are making sure that whatever happened, you are landing on a positive note if you use this method. And I would say, even if you don't use this method, always land positively. Another very similar method is called the STAR method. There's not a ton of difference between the two. I just think it might be a matter of preference for which one works best for you. Some people just don't like that added T. So, you know, it doesn't really matter. What matters here is just coming up with a way to answer a behavioral question that makes sure that you hit all the points that you want to hit. I also want you to think about giving your answers as they are stories. So what a story does is it demonstrates how you've done something and avoids telling people what you've done. So let's take an example. What was the most challenging aspect to your most recent project? A non-story answer, the data analysis was the most challenging, and that we were working with thousands of data points, blah, blah, blah. So I've answered the question, but I've answered the question without a lot of story. Now here's the story answer. In my last project on developing a model of career retention, I worked with a team of 5 classmates. That's my situation. My role was to blah, blah, blah. The data points we collected came from about 10 sources, which meant we were collecting thousands of data points that we needed to analyze. Because I was working with data set 1, I had to ABC. I then had to coordinate closely with my team by whatever actions. And despite this challenge, we were able to successfully analyze the data and came in second place in the project challenge. So you see the difference? People respond to stories. They are more intriguing, they keep our attention, and they engage us across multiple senses. So we've gone from just giving, sure, this was the most challenging piece, to let me set the stage and tell you not only what we were doing, but also what that result was. So how do you prepare for the questions that you will receive? And some of this is going to be an educated guess, right? You're never going to know in advance. Well, I guess that's not 100% true. Most of the time you won't know in advance the types of behavioral questions that you're going to get, or the types of technical questions or case interview questions. Sometimes you just don't know. So you want to make an educated guess as to what they could possibly ask you. One way to go here is to think about the job description. What kinds of projects would you be working on based on what you're reading in the job description, or what you know of that kind of role? What kinds of experiences do they prefer their candidate to have? If they're looking for someone with leadership, They're probably going to ask you something around your leadership style, your leadership capabilities, or your leadership experience. Look at the check the list of responsibilities and qualifications. Also, besides education, is there any other sort of technology education required or any sort of certification? And then lastly, Glassdoor. This is actually a great resource to use. People who've interviewed for different kinds of positions at a company have the option to put online the types of interview questions that they were given. And I think it's a great resource to look at before you go in for an interview to get a flavor of the kinds of questions that you might be asked, if not some specific questions. So not uncommon, what if you're given a question or what if you're asked a question that you just have no experience with? You haven't done what they're asking. So it's okay to answer as honestly as possible, right? But here's the second piece of that. I want you to think about addressing how you would prepare for and carry out the task. So even if you've had no experience with XYZ, I want you to critically think through how you would do it, how you would prepare for and carry out that task. So you're giving them something. Also think about telling a brief story about something similar, maybe a similar time you were faced with a situation, how you learned or how you tackled that challenge, and how you succeeded. So if they're asking you something along the lines of, tell me about your work with engineers. If you've never done any work with engineers, but you've done a lot of work with architects, can you make that leap? Can you talk about what you needed to do to prepare yourself to work with this bunch of architects when that's not your background, and how you would apply it to then going into working with engineers? And some just additional steps here. Research, and this research is in addition to any interview questions that we discussed. So the order in which you do this kind of research is up to you, but as you think about preparing for an interview, of course you want to look at what is their company mission. Is there anything about the company culture that's out there that you can access? Certainly know what they do. Think about, see if you can find information on how they do it. Are there any new products that are out that they have put out? Are they innovating in any way? Are there any articles or news stories that are out there about them that are new? Look at that position description, always coming back to that. Information about the interviewers. When you get their names and their titles, look them up. Look them up and see what they've been doing. Look at their career history, how long they've been in the position or at the company, and see if there's any point of commonality. Sometimes that can be a really great way to break the ice if you both went to the same summer camp. You never know. And then lastly, make sure that if it's an on-site interview or even a Zoom interview, that you get that platform link, that you know the interview location, and that you have mapped your way to that interview location, again, if it's on-site. You definitely want to make sure that you prepare at least 3 questions. At the end of every interview, the interviewer or the interviewers will give you a chance to ask them questions. This is not voluntary. They will present it as a voluntary option. Do you have any questions for us? Or would you like to ask us some questions? The answer to that will always be yes. So think about what information would be helpful for you to know in order to make an informed decision. They're there interviewing you. You are there interviewing them. Is this a good fit for me? Try to avoid asking what can be found through research. For instance, like, what do you do? Things like that. And avoid salary and benefits questions at this stage. I know it can be tempting to say, well, what salary are you looking to bring in a candidate? That is not for this particular time at the interview, but for the offer negotiation call that would come later. And if they don't address your questions within the interview, if they don't address this last question in the interview, you can always end your interview questions with, can you tell me what the next steps are? They understand that to mean, what are the next steps in the interviewing process? And they usually don't make you waste a question by asking that. Normally, I shouldn't even say normally, it really does kind of depend, and also depends on the industry. In my industry, in higher ed, a lot of times we will talk very upfront in the interview to the candidate what the job interview process looks like, when we're going to be finished conducting interviews and when we hope to make an offer, but that can change among industry and among organizations. So if they don't tell you anything about what to expect or what next steps are, you can always use your last question as, can you tell me what the next steps are? And that way you're leaving the interview feeling like you know a little bit more. The interview itself, if you're in person, a few things to think about. This is probably not earth-shattering information. Business professional clothing, hair and makeup, light makeup, simple, clean style, nothing distracting jewelry-wise. You can wear something that is, I don't want to say a conversation starter, but something that's a little pop or something that's kind of draws the eye. There's nothing wrong with that. We just don't want to have it distract negatively. Before you're on site, you want to map out the route beforehand, make sure parking is all taken care of, you know where to park, you know how long it's going to take you, you factor in the traffic. Get there 15 minutes early. It's okay to be 15 minutes early. If it's a little bit more than that, I would recommend that you hang out outside of the lobby area. It might come off not the way that you want if you're showing up super early. Have a Padfolio or a portfolio with you. You can have your questions written down. You can carry copies of your resume if you'd like. And it just helps you feel like you have a little bit more structure going in. And you can certainly make notes during the interview. As they're talking, as they're giving you information, you can make notes. Do a stress reliever prior to, if you're a meditator, do a 5-minute meditation. Do something that's going to help anchor you down. Maybe it's even just going back to what we talked about at the start of this presentation. Why were you even asked to interview? Well, you were asked to interview because they liked what they saw. They wanted to learn more. So what is going to help calm your nerves and anchor you in the moment? It's absolutely normal to be nervous here. Nobody gives a perfect interview. There is no such thing. And people understand that when you're giving an interview, you're a little bit nervous. And that's okay. But you just want to make sure that you do a little bit of a stress reliever beforehand. If you have business cards, you can bring them. This is kind of an outdated concept. I wasn't quite sure to even leave it in. And then again, sort of multiple copies of application materials if you'd like. Most of the time your resume will already have been passed around and will be available to people virtually. But if you're old school like me, you can certainly bring them if you would like. If it's a virtual interview, make sure you do an internet check beforehand. If it's a phone interview, check your ringer, make sure you can hear it. It's not on silent. Make sure your voicemail is set up and the inbox is not full. With your camera angle, I would suggest leaving about a 1 to 2 finger space from the top. Make sure the background is neutral. Virtual backgrounds work really well for this kind of thing. Try to mitigate noise as much as possible. For virtual, you can disable your online pop-ups. Just do a really quick Google search on how to do that. Make sure your lighting is good and not overly lit where your face is washed out. And then if you're doing virtual, guess what? You only have to worry about business professional on the top half. The bottom half, you don't have to worry so much about business professional. During the interview, a couple of things, smile. I know you might not feel like smiling, but you want to showcase enthusiasm. Again, nerves are normal, it's okay. Take a moment if you need to. If you use our online interview prep resource, it's actually called Interview Prep, you can record yourself answering interview questions. And by doing that, I know it's a little scary, but as you watch yourself back, you will be amazed, first of all, at how good you sound. And if you decide to take a minute before answering the question, you'll see that it doesn't last nearly as long as it's lasting in your head. So if you need a minute, if they ask you a question and you need to get your thoughts together, it's okay to say, that's a great question. And then answer, right? You can repeat the question if you need it, if you didn't quite catch it, or sometimes interviewers will ask long-winded questions, and we'll ask 2 questions at once. Not to trip anybody up, it's just sometimes that's the way it happens. So you can ask them to repeat it. You can ask for clarification, and remember that you're also interviewing them too. How are they acting towards you? Did they make you feel welcome? How are they asking the questions? Do they seem interested in what you're saying? Look for these clues too. And then lastly, I know this is potentially strange to put in a presentation like this, but try to have some fun. The people who do super well in interviews are being as genuine as they can, and really just trying to engage the people or person in a conversation. So just try to have some fun. Following up after the interview, handwritten cards, that's super old school, or personalized email. Just make sure you send that within 24 hours. I would mention something specific that was shared in the interview, whether it was something that they shared, whether it was some small talk that you had that really stuck with you. But that's one of the benefits of having a Padfolio or a portfolio, something to make notes. You can jot those down so you don't forget. And then if you don't hear anything after 2 weeks, reach back out to the HR office and ask for an update. Hi, my name is Carrie. I interviewed for XYZ role 2 weeks ago. I'm calling to get a status update. That's all you have to say. So there's no reason to kind of wonder and wonder. It's okay to reach out. So lastly, I just want to leave you with some information on how to access a lot of the resources that we have, everything that we just covered. We have corresponding resources too on our website, career.vt.edu. And to make an appointment with a career advisor, all you have to do is log into Handshake, go over to Career Center, click on Appointments, then click on Schedule a New Appointment and follow the prompts and you're good to go. So thanks so much for tuning in. Good luck on your interview and we will chat soon.